Ladies and gentlemen, Syd Field.
So, just to give you a little bit more background about who I am in a few minutes. I'm the author of 8 books on screenwriting. I travel the world lecturing, giving courses for governments, film communities, production companies, studios. And what I do when I travel is I work with the professionals from the film industry, and the first thing I tell them is that I cannot teach you anything. What I can do is sharpen your skills and give you more tools than you might know that you have at your disposal, so you can increase exponentially your skill and your craft of writing a screenplay. Briefly, I started out making documentary film productions. I worked for a company called Wolper Productions. We did, in the 4.5 years I was there, I worked on 126 television documentaries, writing some, producing some, directing some, researching some. We were very successful in the US in terms of television documentaries. From there, I went and became a freelance screenwriter. For 7 years, I wrote 9 screenplays, 2 produced, 4 optioned, 3 nothing ever happened to, except people told me how good they were and nothing happened. And then I went to work as a single parent for a production company as head of the story department, which meant I read screenplays. So as I was taking a break from writing after 7 years, I was asking myself questions as I was reading these screenplays. What made these screenplays better than the other 1,960 I read? I had no answers. So I was in a state of I don't know. And it was okay for be in that state of I don't know. I got a job teaching at a school called Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. And it was there I realized that everybody who came into the screenwriting course was my teacher. I knew nothing about teaching screenwriting. I knew nothing about articulating the craft. I knew nothing about sharpening skills. So I went in from the position that I'm the student and you guys are the teachers. So your questions allowed me to formulate answers that ultimately became the body of my work, which I put in the book Screenplay. Screenplay was the first of 8 books. It's published in 29 languages around the country, around the world, used in more than 400 colleges and universities, been translated into, I just said that, 29 countries. And again, at this point, I'm traveling, I'm teaching. I just finished a screenplay for an Indian production company that's in pre-production right now. I'm a script doctor. I work on screenplays. I did Wall Street. I did Y Tu Mamá También. I did Thunderheart. I did City of Joy. I did many, many films. And at this point in my life, I'm teaching at the Masters of Professional Writing program at the University of Southern California, USC, in Los Angeles. It's a graduate program where you can explore the different distinctions of writing, the different disciplines of writing. So we have, as a graduate program, we have fiction, nonfiction, we have film criticism, we have resume writing, we have screenwriting, we have playwriting, we have poetry, and everyone comes in for this 2-year program and they begin to experiment with the different forms to find out what it is that they want to write. I'm now moving into technology more. I've just finished developing an iPhone app for screenwriters. We're beta testing it right now, as a matter of fact, and my testers, unfortunately, are between the ages of 15 and 20. but it's going to be a dynamic app for the iPhone, which we're then going to move into the iPad technology, because the real vehicle for this program is really in the iPad, but we'll come to that later this year. So once again, that's where I'm coming from. Once again, I cannot tell you how happy I am to be here. I have longed to be in Israel for many, 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 many years. Ruth told me to say this, so I might as well say it now. I was raised in Los Angeles. My grandfather was an Orthodox rabbi who came to Los Angeles in 1907, and he created the first Orthodox synagogue on the west side in Los Angeles. Our family owns property here in Tel Aviv, in Holon, and we're trying to find out more about it now. And if I intersperse our discussions today with stories of eating kosher cooking, I may share them with you. So let me, first of all, begin with our course today. We're going to be talking about how you go about setting up your character and story. But first of all, I want to create an intention. For me, intentions are very positive tools to generate energy for the future. Meaning, if you can articulate what it is that you want to win or gain or get or achieve out of this course, for example, what tools do you want to walk away with? After all, the Writers and Producers Guild brought us from Los Angeles all the way here. What do you want to get out of this 2-day experience with 4 great teachers? You're not just coming here and sleeping. It's a beautiful day outside. Today, at least. So I would like to ask you what it is that you want to walk away with when you leave this course tonight at 6:30. Do you want to sharpen your skills in dialogue? Do you want to sharpen your skills in structure? Do you want to create better characters? Do you want to write more visually? Do you want to write more succinctly? Do you want to go into an original idea and formulate that idea? Every single one of you here is here for a reason. So I'm asking you, what might that reason be? Think about it. There's no answer right now. But as you are going through the day, as you kind of contemplate what Linda and John told you yesterday, what myself and Michael will be telling you today, find out what it is that, number one, brought you here, number two, what you might want to get out of it, and then begin to focus that question into yourself. Yeah, and the truth is that this course, this weekend, is really not going to begin until it's over. Meaning you're going to be drinking in information from the 4 of us, and then at 6:30 the lights are going to go down, you're going to go home, you're going to go out to dinner, you're going to go back to your apartments or houses, and then tomorrow morning you're going to be thinking, and this course is going to be coming back up again. So it's very important to allow yourself to kind of catch what comes up in terms of goals, in terms of skills, in terms of craft, in terms of what you want to get out of it. So this is a great opportunity for you to check in, to turn within, and ask yourself what you want to get out of this 2-day course. I'm very clear on what I want you to get out of this course, what my intention is. So my intention, we can see all right, is to expand, enlarge, and broaden your knowledge, comprehension, and technique of the screenplay and the art and craft of screenwriting. So I want you to take where you are now and expand that to include new things, so you understand more about the principles and the craft of screenwriting, and it is a very special craft. Sometimes we flounder trying to find rules or ways of telling our story visually. So in that case, we need to really talk about the elements of screenwriting and the craft of screenwriting. So let me read you a quote. Look at this quote. It's a very, very interesting one, which I love. Screenwriting is like building a piece of furniture. In terms of form and function, it is a craft in which all the pieces must fit. People talk about the three-act structure, that this is how you write a screenplay. But mastering the elements of craft and making them natural and invisible is the trick to writing screenplays. You have to learn it. And then you have to unlearn it and disguise it so the audience never sees the machinery of the screenwriting itself. Pretty interesting, isn't it? No other discipline in writing, not novels or plays, comes up to this craft of screenwriting. It is a unique craft. And once we understand the dynamics and the principles of it, we can unlearn it and then just write our screenplays. When you face the blank sheet of page, that is an awesome moment. I think we all know that. How are you going to fill up the page? What are you going to say? I have a friend who's a painter who does these large canvases, and you know how he begins his painting? He starts at the upper left-hand corner and begins painting a few colors. And then one color leads to another, and one shape leads to a shape, and another shape leads to another shape, and pretty soon his entire canvas is filled. So that's what we do in terms of filling a canvas. We understand the craft of writing a screenplay, then we can apply it to our own stories. You have to learn it, and then you have to unlearn it. So who said this? Very wise. Jose Garcia. And he said it about a film called The Motorcycle Diaries. Very, very interesting. Because it is a craft. So let's be on our way with our craft. Today, I thought we would talk about that blank sheet of paper. In many ways, we all have ideas that we want to write as a screenplay. In many ways, we have it in our heads, what it looks like, who the characters are, and so on. And then you get to the point where, well, you say to yourself, I've done enough research. I know my characters really well. I have a great opening, and now I want to write that story. So then you sit down and you write the words, fade in. Now what? Uh-oh. We got a problem. You could say that my story is going to begin with Jake arriving at work. Well, how are you going to set that up? Who is Jake? What does he do? And what's he on his way to work for? You could show him driving in a car, taking a cab, riding the subway. You can show him getting out of bed, getting a quick breakfast. You can show him walking into the office. You can show a clock ticking as he's racing on the freeway to make an 8 o'clock meeting. What's the best way to open your story and set up your character? So we're going to start from that point. Before we write one word of the screenplay, there's one basic question that has to be answered. And that question is, what's the best way to set up your story and introduce your main character? What is the best way to set up your story? I mean, you have 120 blank sheets of paper that you're going to fill. What is the best, most attractive, most interesting way to set up your character and story? Now, there's two ways. You can do it through an action, or you can do it through a character. An action or a character. An action means your character is doing something, and by performing that act, that character is revealing who he or she is. That's one way to open your story, depending on the story that you're telling. So you want to ask yourself, and if it's a character, do you open the story with your character in a certain behavioral situation? The day I left, my wife was driving up to a workshop, to a Feldenkrais workshop. She's a practitioner in Berkeley, California. She no sooner got out 67 miles north of LA when she got stopped for a speeding ticket. Now, she's not a very, she's a pretty dynamic lady. So she said to the officer, "Can I see your radar gun?" And you can't tell me that I was going 96 miles an hour. And could you, say, make an exception or something? I was unaware of this. And how do I know that your radar gun is the radar gun that timed me? Maybe it was someone before me. Cars were passing me. She does not, she likes to question a little bit. Her name is Aviva. You can understand why. So anyway, as she was telling me this, I was saying, "Aviva, just shut up. Just get the ticket and get out of there." Anyhow, it worked out okay, and she got there okay. But that's a way to show character. What do you show by an illustration, by a scene like that? You have a character who resists authority. There may be 3 of you here in the room who know what I'm talking about. So once we ask ourselves that question, what's the best way to open our screenplay? Our second question then becomes, well, what kind of a story are you writing? It's something to think about. People say, well, I'm writing a screenplay. Oh yeah, what's it about? Oh, it's about a guy who's mourning the loss of his father, and then it turns kind of into a mystery story, and then there's a love story that gets in there, and so on. You can't do that. There ain't no way. You have to be very clear and focused on what it is that you're writing about. So what kind of a story are you writing? What is the genre? Science fiction, romantic comedy, drama, mystery thriller. So it's very important to know what kind of a story you're writing. Now, the basic rule is very simple but complicated. The basic rule to remember when you are setting up your story or your character is this. Either the character drives the action, or the action drives the character. Something to think about. Either the action drives the character from page 1, word 1, or the action drives the character. So what way are you going to show your opening? What is the most effective way for you to set up your character and story? So I'm going to give you a little visual example of what I mean by action driving the story and character, and another example of character driving the action. So we're going to show a clip right now. If we could have the lights down, would be great.
This is a story of boy meets girl. The boy, Tom Hansen of Margate, New Jersey, grew up believing that he'd never truly be happy until the day he met the one. This belief stemmed from early exposure to sad British pop music and a total misreading of the movie The Graduate. The girl, Summer Finn of Shinnecock, Michigan, did not share this belief. Since the disintegration of her parents' marriage, she'd only loved two things. The first was her long, dark hair. The second was how easily she could cut it off and feel nothing. Tom meets Summer on January 8th. He knows almost immediately she's who he's been searching for. This is a story of boy meets girl. But you should know up front, this is not a love story.
The character is going to be driving the action.
They made a statue.
It's not a love story, but he wants it to be.
And put it on a mountain top. Now tourists come and stare at us. Blow bubbles with their gum. Take photographs of fun. Have fun. They'll name a city after us. And later say it's all our fault. Then they'll give us a talking to. Then they'll give us a talking to. 'Cause they've got years of experience. Living in a den of thieves. Rummaging for answers in the pages. Living in a den of thieves. And it's contagious. And it's contagious. I said it's contagious. And it's contagious.
So you can keep the lights down. We're going to go into another clip very, very shortly. So this is an example of the character driving the action. As the narrator says, this is a love story, but don't expect it to end happily. The young boy made a decision when he was about 7 or 8 years old that one day he would find the one and it would make him complete. The action will drive this story, the character drives this story all the way through the dramatic action from beginning of the film to the end. And of course, we see his love story unfolding through his eyes. So the girl character is not going to be a full-fledged, dynamic, dimensional portrait of a woman. It's going to be shaped by his mental thinking processes. So this character drives the story forward, drives the action forward through his dramatic need, through his belief that the one day he will find the one girl and that will make him happy. That's the character driving the action. Now, the other side of that rule is the action drives the character. Meaning that when the film opens up, you have a character who has a certain dramatic need, a certain force that will carry him through the entire narrative line of the movie, of the screenplay. And in this case, there's a reason why the first act of a screenplay is setting up your characters and story. Because we are going to set up this character through his actions, through his dramatic need. So let's watch a clip now of an example of the action driving the character. Maybe we can do that, Ruth, and just simply. This is the action driving the character, the action driving character.
Baruch atu Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher gidishonu b'mitzvosov, v'rotzabonu v'shabas kodshoi, v'avrotzanin chilonu, v'koroinu ma'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techilu l'mikruei kodesh, Decher leyetzias Mitzrayim, ki vonu v'chartu v'aisonu gidashtu mikol v'amim, v'shabas kodshochu v'avrotzain hinchaltonu.
Now watch this visual transition. Beautiful.
Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Watch. Transition bridges time, place, and action.
Name?
Horowitz, Salomon. Bugayev Gizelan. Bugayev
We're setting up story here. Then we'll set up character.
Itzhak Hudas. Hudak. Itzhak.
Cukier Helena.
Cukier Helena. Hirsch Salomon. Hirsch Salomon. Hauptmann Chaim.
Weizmann. Weizmann.
Hermann Ludwig.
Elsa Bauchmann.
Josef Klein. Klein. David Ignacy.
Paula Biefer. Nadel Rahel. Steiner Gertruda.
Now watch how we develop the character through his actions. Not a word need be spoken. Now watch how his actions define himself.
Here, do you know who that man is? No. them over a round of drinks.
Very good, sir. And who shall I say they are from?
You can say they are from me.
From the gentleman.
Where? They know him? Find out who he is.
Yes, sir.
Agnieszka, I would give anything to hear you sing tonight. But I know you want it.
Who remembers me?
What's he doing? Stay here.
How are you doing? You'd leave a woman alone at a table in a place like this? Sweetheart, you're the picture of loneliness. Lovely fragrance, you're breaking my heart. An extra chair, please. Vodka for my friend. For the lady. No, no.
Im Grunewald, ist Holzauktion. Ist Holzauktion. Im Grunewald, ist Holzauktion.
Come to the table, girls. Drink with us.
Um die Ecke rum, rechts um die Ecke rum. Überall ist heute Holzauktion.
Come to us. Marry us.
Der ganze Cluster Süßholz kostet einen Taler. Der ganze Cluster Süßholz kostet einen Taler.
I'll tell you what I leave like cooperative. 2 days after the Lord bastard all choose who wear the star, Jewish tailors are turning them out by the gross in a variety of fabrics at fleece each. Tell me about your cellar.
I have an excellent German Riesling, 1937.
French, Bordeaux, Chateau Latour, 28, 29. It's as if they have no idea what kind of law it is. As if it's the emblem of a writing club. The Margot, 29, Burgundy then, Romani Conti, 37.
It's human nature. We do this to avoid that.
That's what they have done since thousands of years. It's what they do. They weather the storm.
But this storm is different. This is not the Romans. This storm is DSS.
Martin? Yes, sir. Who is that man?
That's Oscar Schindler.
So, two different examples of setting up your story, one through action, where the action drives the character, like in 500 Days of Summer, and one with character driving the action. Oskar Schindler has one purpose in mind through this entire film, and that is to befriend the Nazis so he can rescue as many Jews as he can from the concentration camps. That drives him all the way through the film. That's his dramatic need, what he wants, and it's constant throughout the film. So these are just two ways to think about setting up your story and character. If you know your character's action, the dramatic need, what drives him or her through the narrative line of story, then you might want to create a scene, like in Schindler's List, where he wants to articulate that need visually. And then if you want to show a character's action, a character driving the action, you can know in your own mind, in your character research, that your character is going to be a person who believes in a dream and he wants to follow that dream. Like they say in 500 Days of Summer, he made the realization at 7 years old that one day he would find the one, and that one would make him whole and complete. Pretty common story. So when we talk about setting up your character and setting up your story, we have to know and understand some things about your story. So one of the best ways that we can prepare for writing and setting up our story or character is then to go back and examine your own story. And what do you think is the best and most effective way to set up the main character in your screenplay? Again, we have approximately 10 pages of screenplay in US cinema, and now it seems international cinema. We have about 10 pages to grab the attention of your reader or your audience. I read thousands of screenplays, and I can tell you within 10 pages whether they're working. And out of the generosity of my being, I'll give the writer 30 pages. But I am not going to do the writer's job for him or her. There ain't no way. The writer has to know how to set up the story and character from page 1, word 1. That's just the way it is. When I was reading, I was always 70 screenplays behind. I read thousands, over 2,000 screenplays in a little over 2 years. So what made, I found 40 for production, what made those 40 better than the other 1,960? That was the question I was living with for months. And I began to see that a well-written screenplay, a well-thought out, a well-researched, a well-developed screenplay begins with page 1, word 1, because the writer knows what he or she is going to do. They know how to set up their story effectively, and the best way to do it in that way. So again, do you want to establish your character through an action? Like we did with Oskar Schindler. Look how he dressed. He was a meticulous man, a wealthy man, and he had one dramatic need, which was to befriend the Nazis so he could serve his own need. And that's what he started to do from page 1, word 1 of the screenplay. We set up the situation. Poland, 1939. Names were being taken. Railroad cars were there. And then we cut to Oskar Schindler preparing for a night out so he can do something about that. That's setting up your character through his action or her action. So, do you want to establish your character through an action? Or through his or her behavior? Now think about behavior. Behavior means a specific response to an individual action. You know, someone lights a candle and your hand's near the flame, it's going to burn. And the person may get angry or not. That's his or her behavior. A specific response to a specific situation. So action or character or behavior. So how are you going to set up the story? You know, I'm assuming that everyone here has done the research on the storyline that they're working on. meaning you know the story, you can articulate the story, you can write out a 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 page treatment of that story, you can structure the story into ending and beginning and plot point 1 and plot point 2 and midpoint. I assume you know all that, you've done all your research there, but now we come to the specifics of actually sitting down, facing a blank sheet of paper and writing fade in. Well, what happens next? Screenwriting, you know, a screenplay is a story that's told with pictures. Told with pictures. In dialogue and description, and placed within the context of dramatic structure. There's no other craft, there's no other writing craft that has the details and the understanding of a screenplay. You can certainly use, I get letters from novelists all the time telling me how they use my methods in order to build up, research, and create their storylines for the novels. You can do that. It's very important to know what you're going to write before you write it. I mean, I've spent too many times and too many years sitting down. Well, I have a great idea. You see, there's an opening. It's a desert shot, and in the far distance, we see a plume of smoke, a cloud of sand rising. And as we watch this vehicle is coming toward us in the sand, and then suddenly stops, and then 2 people get out of the van, and they look around, one way, nothing. The other way, nothing. And then what happens? You better know. I certainly don't. So how are you going to set up the story? Now you have to understand, I mentioned last night, that the first 10 pages of your screenplay are the most important pages of the entire script. The most important pages. I can tell you in 10 pages of your screenplay whether it's working or not. And if it's not working, you know, you're not going to get past a reader. As John said last night, everybody thinks they're writing for a producer or for an actor. You're writing for a reader. There ain't nobody in Hollywood that's going to read your screenplay except a reader in the beginning. So you want to grab their attention with vitality, with insight, with attention. That's how you want to grab the reader. So the first 10 pages are the most important pages of the screenplay. And in those 10 pages, 3 things need to be established. 3 things need to be established. 1, who is the main character? In other words, who the story is about. That has to be introduced within the first 10 pages. And I know many people who begin, they may start with an inciting incident, which we'll go into, but their main character may not appear until 15 or 20 pages into the screenplay. If that's the case, then you better make sure that your opening is so strong and so active and so dynamic that the reader cannot stop turning pages. If you're just setting up a situation, look what Steven Spielberg does in Schindler's List. Look how he sets up the situation. Railroad tracks, Poland, 1939, names are being taken. He sets up the situation in exactly 5.5 minutes. And that's about 3 pages of screenplay. You can set up a situation in the beginning and then bring your characters into that situation. We call that an inciting incident, which we'll see in a little bit. So the first thing that you need in the first 10 pages is we have to know who the main character is in your story. Number 2, what's the dramatic premise? Meaning, what is the story about? You have to find a way through dialogue or through picture to establish what this story is all about. I mean, I just watched a film called True Grit a couple of days before I left for Israel. True Grit was really interesting because the first minute of film time, we know exactly who the character is, we know exactly what's happened, we know exactly what the story is going to be, and from then on it simply follows. Now the TV series The Arbitrator does that same thing. The very first episode is outside or on the day of the eve of the son's bar mitzvah. And the arbitrator, the grandfather or the father, tells him 3 things are important in this life. Family, your word, and do not be afraid of death. And from that moment on, you know exactly what this is going to be. There's no doubts figuring it out. I don't know about you, but when I see a film and I don't know what it's about after about 10 minutes, I start thinking about when's the best time to get some more popcorn. I mean, if the film is not working, it's not up to the audience to make it work. It's up to the writer to make it work. That's your responsibility. So we have to know what the story is about, because if you don't know the story, who does? I mean, it's really an interesting question. If you don't know what your story is about, who does? No matter what someone else says about it, you have to know what you want to say and show and tell. The third thing that we need to know within the first 10 pages: what is the dramatic situation? What are the circumstances surrounding the action? So the circumstances are, in the background, elements or events in the background that influence the character, the situation. So we want to find out, sometimes we have to establish that later on in the act, but the situation in Schindler's List is right there from the very beginning. Poland, 1939. Names are being taken. That's the situation. The story is about a man who risks everything to rescue as many people as he can. So we need to know and we need to understand what those 3 elements are that drive the first 10 pages of the screenplay. We have conflict set up from page 1, word 1. We know character, we know premise, we know situation. We have all these elements at our disposal for conflict. And conflict drives your story all the way through from beginning to end. The word conflict even means in opposition to. So if one person wants one thing and another person wants another thing, we have conflict. Exactly. So that's why the first 10 pages become so important in the screenplay. You can't have anything without exposition. You can't just have things suspended in moments in time and expect it to grab your reader or your audience's attention. You know, and it's interesting because these elements are essential for setting up the story, and that's what we're talking about this morning. Setting up the character and setting up the story so you can keep the attention of your reader and your audience. So it's just a perfect, for me, it's just a perfect example of what works in terms of designing the first 10 pages of your screenplay. And that's what you need to do in the first 10 pages, design it. So when you think about opening your screenplay and you think about setting up character and story, how are you going to go about designing the first 10 pages? Well, when you're preparing the first 10 pages, you need to know your character's backstory, meaning what happens to your character a day, a week, or an hour before your story begins? What happens to your main character either a day, a week, or an hour before your story begins? And the purpose for that is to allow you to literally jump into your storyline from page 1, word 1. Backstories could be anything with conflict. For example, this morning, my backstory getting here was this. I was supposed to be picked up at 7:45. No driver. So finally, after waiting 15 minutes, I called a cab. I got here, he was rushing through traffic as fast as he could. I got here, no power, as we all know. And once we did get power, no cable. Is that a backstory or is that a backstory? And then we begin our time together using that as an emotional backdrop to the story. So your story can begin from page 1, word 1. Because if you start exploring what your story is about, you're going to lose your reader in a few pages. So figure out your character's backstory, and it usually is something of conflict. It usually is something of conflict. It's not, a backstory is not going to the market because you don't have a quart of milk and then coming back and just and changing to go out. That's not a backstory. If something happened when you went out, you slipped and you twisted your knee or your ankle that stops you from going what you were going to do, that's a backstory. There's conflict involved. So, do you have an idea about the opening scene or sequence? Certainly you've been thinking about your story. You've been writing research notes and writing to yourself and thinking about it as you're driving or on the bus or on the tram or at the dentist's office or at the workspace. You've been thinking about this. So do you have any idea about what you think your opening scene or sequence might be? Just kind of running around in your head, We all do that. So is it an action sequence? Meaning depending on the story? Or do you want to show your character to reacting to some kind of physical or emotional event? Now think about that. What's the best way to set up your story and introduce your character? Through an action, through his or her behavior, through some kind of incident that grabs your attention immediately? Again, the first 10 pages are the most important pages of your entire screenplay. What are you going to do with them? It's one thing talking about it. It's another thing sitting down at a blank sheet of paper, the blank computer screen, and filling up that screen with words and images that move and touch and inspire people. And that's what it's all about. That, to me, is the writer's responsibility. You have to touch people, and you have to move people, and you have to inspire people. That's your gift as a writer. And sometimes you have to rise up to the gift that you are blessed to have to do that, and not write down to a lower medium. What's the difference between behavior and actions? Well, behavior is... Well, but they're both the same thing. In action and behavior, a behavior is a specific reaction to a specific event. That's an action. However, I'm talking about a larger narrative action of the screenplay. What kind of a screenplay are you writing? We're not talking about the very specific little action or reaction. We're talking about the action of the narrative line that drives your story through to completion. That's what we're talking about. So, but I'm using the word action, meaning to show and reveal your character. Right? So are you going to show your character running down the street, dodging cars to make it to a store before they close? That's an action. It means that he or she has forgotten something and wants to get there before the store is closed, or for whatever the reason. And the character may have done that and forgotten any money to pay for what they need. That's a character as well. That shows you a kind of character. So, do you want to show your character reacting to some kind of physical or emotional event? Or do you want to show your character in an action sequence? Because sometimes you may want to open your screenplay with an inciting incident. An inciting incident. Very, very important concept to understand when you're beginning writing a screenplay. The inciting incident. Now, the inciting incident is a specific incident, episode, or event that dramatically impacts your character's life and literally throws it out of balance. Remember, all drama is conflict. Without conflict, you have no action. Without action, you have no character. Without character, you have no story. And without story, I am afraid to tell you, you ain't got no screenplay know-how. So we need to find out how you're going to set up that story so everybody's going to continue to read. So when you use an inciting incident, in some cases you cannot use one because your storyline does not dictate an inciting incident. But you have that choice. You can choose to use some kind of an inciting incident or choose not to use some kind of an inciting incident. The choice is yours depending on the story you are telling. And every story is individual and unique. And you have to take that responsibility and show it or dramatize it as such. So the need of your character is finding a way to restore his or her life back into balance. It could be bringing someone to justice, winning a race or competition, solving a murder or entering a beauty contest. These are all elements of the inciting incident. Now, the narrative action of the storyline is built around finding a solution to the inciting incident. You know, for every question, there is an answer. And what is the answer of your story? You can't just show scenes randomly without attachment, without a narrative through line holding it together. We just don't do that. You cannot keep a reader turning pages in that environment where nothing happens. So the narrative action of the storyline is built around finding a solution to the inciting incident. Now, the inciting incident is usually the very first scene or sequence in the screenplay. And the purpose of an inciting incident is to set the story in motion. To set the story in motion. That's what is good about an inciting incident. And again, not every story can use an inciting incident. What kind of a story are you writing? Can you use an inciting incident to establish the dynamics of the screenplay? Or not? If not, then you find another way, like 500 Days of Summer. Or like Schindler's List, you find another way to do it. Now, I had a student at USC who was a surfer, and he never understood the inciting incident. And then one day he came to class and he said, you know, I couldn't catch a wave all day long. And it suddenly dawned on me, this is a great metaphor for the inciting incident. How many of you have surfed or know surfing in here? Raise your hands. Great. Well, you know, when you surf, you paddle out beyond the breakers and you are trying to reach a wave to ride the wave. And it's called catching the wave. So when you are surfing, you are trying to catch the wave, and then when you do catch the wave, you ride the wave. One's an apple, one's an orange. They're two different things, catching the wave and riding the wave. So the inciting incident is very much like catching the wave, and it gives you an opportunity to show an action or an event or an episode or a scene or a sequence, and then bring the main character into the storyline as a reaction of that sequence. For example, in a murder mystery, you would show the murder, and then the main character is the inspector who comes to investigate the murder. That's the purpose of an inciting incident. It sets the story in motion. So we're going to have another example of an inciting incident. So we're going to show another clip. And this is one of my favorite movies, which we'll talk about after, but we're ready for the clip. Thank you.
Reporting live for CNN from the French aircraft carrier Foch, somewhere in the Mediterranean. 6 days ago, as the rebellion in Chechnya spread to the neighboring Caucasus republics, the Russian president ordered massive bombing strikes against rebel positions and Belokani. Appalled at the loss of human life, the President of the United States, joined by the French President and the British Prime Minister, suspended all foreign aid to Russia. Ultra-nationalist leader Vladimir Rodchenko denounced the U.S. pressure as an act of war against the Russian Republic and Russian sovereignty. Denouncing his own president as a U.S. puppet, he called on the Russian people to join him in revolt. He said this brutish and hypocritical American intervention will not go unanswered. On Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, Moscow time, the Russian parliament was suspended and martial law was declared. With the government in crisis, the Russian Republic was entering into what can only be described as a state of civil war. Then yesterday at dawn, Rodchenko and rebel forces seized the region around Vladivostok, including a naval base and a nuclear missile base housing Russian ICBMs. As regular Russian military forces move in to encircle Rodchenko, Allied military forces are in a state of high alert. These French planes taking off behind me have been deployed near the Caucasus since the beginning of the crisis. And a crisis which started in the Caucasus has now spread to the Far East and appears to be turning into the worst standoff since the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is Richard Valeriani reporting live for CNN from the French aircraft carrier Foch, somewhere in the Mediterranean.
I need a volunteer from the audience. Me. A brave volunteer. Preferably somebody who was born on October 18th, 1990.
That's you, honey.
Over here? Ah, you must be the birthday girl. What's your name?
Russian ultra-nationalist leader, backed by his rebel army, threatened nuclear attack on the United States and Japan. The threats come as a response to the United States' involvement in Chechnya and are not considered idle.
Now sit on the board and tell me, Robin, do you believe in magic? Good. Because if you believe in magic, we can suspend you in the air without the help of a flying carpet.
Meeting in an emergency session while the
Mr.
President
Dollar's limitation.
Joint Chiefs of Staff. That footage was taken yesterday, but half an hour ago, surrounded by hostile forces, rebel leader Vladimir Radchenko threatened
Maybe it's not as bad as it looks.
on the United States and Japan. Should anyone, including the Russian army, attempt to move in on him. Based on the history of this man, this cannot be viewed as an idle threat. Sander Van Oken, standing by.
It is.
So look at what we have. We have an incident that occurs in an independent place far away from the scene of the action, but it provides the incident that the main character is going to react to. So it's an ideal way to bring in the main character by creating an inciting incident that's independent of the character but does affect him. Notice how the storyline is brought into the story through CNN. We see an event happening through real newsreel footage. Then we cut to the birthday party with Denzel Washington, and then the news comes through CNN that generates the dramatic premise of the film. So the Russian rebels have threatened to launch a nuclear attack. There's got to be a response. So Denzel Washington and Viggo Mortensen are going to be part of that response that the U.S. sends out. Now, you may say this is a U.S. film, doesn't apply to an international film, doesn't apply to a European film, especially doesn't apply to an Israeli film. I've been teaching film all over the world, and I have to tell you that there is a universal knowledge of community when it comes to writing a screenplay. Every country wants to have a successful film, and there's no reason why Israel can't. Many of your films are successful, but they may not have reached the international market, at least to my knowledge. So it doesn't mean you don't have the talent. You've got extraordinary talent here. You have extraordinary subjects here. You have extraordinary stories here. You've got a unique situation. You are who you are, and that's what you want to explore. So when you sit down to write a screenplay, I may be talking about the Hollywood film, but I'll tell you, these principles of craft work in every single language and every single culture all over the world. The international film is becoming stabilized into a unified method of communication, and that is telling stories. And that's what we want to do. So no matter whether you agree with a Hollywood film or not, I don't myself, but I know that the principles are firm and stand up. Just the way night follows day and day follows night. It's something that works in telling stories. Writing the screenplay is, and may I quote Syd Field? Just tell the story. I started out really as a screenwriter in a very, very odd way. I had the great privilege of being mentored by one of the greatest film directors of all time, Jean Renoir. Jean Renoir sat me down one day when I did not know what I wanted to do with my life. And he said, "The future is film."
I would like to introduce Syd Field. Syd is the internationally celebrated author of 8 books on screenwriting. His classic screenplay, considered the Bible of the film industry, and the Screenwriters Workbook are now in their 40th printing, published in 29 languages and used in more than 400 colleges and universities across the country.
The chapter I'm going to read, or the portion of the chapter I'm going to read, is called In Search of New Beginnings. On a bright sunny day in May 1966, after more than 4.5 years in which I participated in the making of more than 125 television documentaries, I decided to leave the safe haven of Wolper Productions. I became a freelance screenwriter. From a freelance screenwriter, I became an author. And how many of you brought all my books, except Jared? Jared gets extra credit. I'm signing off on his screenplay already. From being an author, I have traveled around the world many, many, many times. Somehow, USC has always been in my life. So do you have conflict there? Everyone see what I'm doing? You find out what a person's dramatic need is, a family, loved ones, and so on, and what can he be tempted with in his new life, but the very things he knows he wants. Today I share this dramatic insight with my screenwriting students around the world, and I show them how a dramatic scene will often be followed by a broad, humorous comedy. It's a way of opening up and expanding the storyline, giving it more depth and dimension, more character. When you make a commitment, the first thing the universe does is test you on the commitment. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
So that's like a Sydism, you know? I woke up feeling that maybe it was time for me to take the plunge and start writing my own screenplay. I had just made the decision when the phone rang. It was Denise. Sam had just finished his draft of The Wild Bunch and asked if I would read it. It's been a wonderful, wonderful lifetime.